Roll call?
Committee Member Hester Williams.
Present.
Thank you. Committee Member McClinton Horner.
Here.
Thank you. Committee Member Christian.
Here.
Vice Chair Artis. And Chair Mattson.
Here. Can I ask you a quick question about the mics? Should we have all of our mics on, or are they conflicting?
They will not conflict.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks. So we're first having a presentation on the Napa County Regional Greenhouse Gas Inventory. Pass it over to you, Jason.
Yes, Chair. Deborah, sorry. We're blessed tonight to have Deborah Elliott with the Napa County Department of Environmental Health, I think is Environmental Services, maybe DFH. Anyway, with Napa County, and she's been working with the Napa County Climate Action Committee, and being that this body is now starting to look at sustainability issues, we wanted to keep everybody abreast of what's happening at the county level. And I think all of you have been starting to now get emails from this committee and some of their agendas and their meeting announcements and whatnot. So if not,
This should be coming to your city email.
to your city email, yeah. Yeah, so we have to use our city email for all of our city business. So at your city email, you should be starting to be on these distribution lists. They had a meeting on Wednesday, actually, of this week. And so without further ado, I want to introduce Deborah and thank you profusely for joining us this evening. She'll be presenting this inventory of greenhouse gases that was done, and I'll let Deborah take it away. So thank you, Deborah.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you so much for having me. I am going to share my screen now. And let me know if that is not full screen for some reason.
It's
should
not totally full screen.
Okay, let me try one more time.
But it's pretty good.
Close.
Oh, there
that
we
better?
go. Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. So this evening I am going to talk about our greenhouse gas inventory, which we just finalized last week, and we took it to the Climate Action Committee for their approval. And I'll also touch on the history of the Climate Action Committee and how we funded the forecast, and then we'll dive into the actual forecast and a little bit about the inventory and forecast, and we'll also look at American Canyon emissions specifically. So if you are not aware, the Climate Action Committee has been a formal committee since 2020. Prior to that, it was an informal committee, but each of the jurisdictions has 2 elected officials that represent their jurisdiction on the Climate Action Committee. We generally meet monthly. It ends up, a couple of people have asked, so last year we met 8 times, and the year before we met 9 times out of the 12 months. So we try to meet monthly, and we discuss potential actions that jurisdictions can take individually to further climate action in their jurisdiction. And we hear presentations and have made some, we kind of educate the jurisdictions and the representatives so that they can go back to their jurisdictions and implement climate actions as needed. We don't have any jurisdiction over the separate jurisdictions at the Climate Action Committee, but we do make some recommendations of things that they could do. The county is the administrator for the Climate Action Committee, so we staff the committee, David Morrison and I, and we've been working on that now for a few years. So funding for the greenhouse gas inventory actually comes 100% from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. We requested funding for them for the inventory and forecast, and they granted that to us, and that grant is ending at the end of December. So we're getting in just under the wire. And we also received funding from each of the jurisdictions to do 2 additional memos. So we have the greenhouse gas inventory memo, which I'd be happy to share after this meeting. We also have the greenhouse gas forecast memo. And then our consultants are currently working on a memo on short-lived climate pollutants and a memo on carbon sequestration in the county. So those are still coming up, but we're happy to have completed the inventory. So now I'm going to jump into the inventory. I think it's probably, you're welcome to interrupt me, or I can just take questions at the end. And I will say we have technical consultants that worked on this, so I may not be able to answer all of your technical questions tonight. But if there's something that I can't answer, we can reach out to the consultants and get back to you. So this is the main regional emissions by sector. So the total emissions are about 1.2 million metric tons of CO2. And this is showing down the breakdown per sector. So this is interesting to look at because when you're thinking about different climate actions in your jurisdiction or even individually, you can kind of see the overall regional impact that you can have. So for instance, on-road transportation is our largest sector of emissions. So that's 39%. And that one from a local government standpoint, there's some things we can do to influence on-road transportation, but it's really thinking about some of those tricky issues like how do we reduce vehicle miles traveled? How do we get people out of their cars and encourage them to walk or potentially, change their habits a bit so that they're not putting all those miles on their vehicle, or change their vehicle completely to electric, which then changes the emissions factor of those vehicles. The next largest sector is building energy. And this one is another one that local government can have some influence on. Things like switching to electrification, switching some of those appliances, so water heaters and building heating systems. Now there's electric technology, and those electric technologies have reduced greenhouse gas emissions when you switch to them. Also, things like energy efficiency, making sure that your house and business are energy efficient are a great way to impact that sector. Solid waste is the next largest sector after that, and solid waste is both the solid waste produced in each of the jurisdictions. So we calculated that based on CalRecycle data. And then it's also the solid waste that is currently waste in place at the 2 landfills. And both of those landfills are in the unincorporated county. One is called the American Canyon landfill, and that one is no longer in use, but continues to give off some emissions. And the other one is there's another landfill within the unincorporated county that's also currently in use. The next largest sector is off-road equipment. So that's things like lawn and garden equipment and other off-road vehicles, boats, and ATVs and things like that. It does not include agricultural off-road vehicles. So those are in the agricultural sector, and that's things like tractors. So off-road equipment is 9% regionally, agriculture is 8%, and then the last 2 sectors are wastewater and imported water, which are much smaller. So this is the regional look, and in a couple slides, we'll dive into the American Canyon pie chart. So this is just some information to kind of fill in those gaps of where that those emissions are coming from in the different sectors. So 75% of the building energy emissions are from natural gas. And a big part of that is because the electricity sector has gotten a lot cleaner over the past 10 to 20 years. So a lot of that energy in the electricity sector is coming from renewable sources like solar, wind, and hydroelectric. Whereas natural gas is a much higher intensity in carbon emissions. So that's why we see that 75% of those emissions are from natural gas. And so that's why the state and other MCE Clean Energy, the state, and other organizations like the Bay Area Regional Energy Network talk about really focusing on removing those natural gas systems like heaters and water heaters and putting in the electric technology. And this also includes gas stoves. So we're trying to get people to switch to induction stoves because once you switch over to that electricity, it's a lot cleaner. The source is a lot cleaner than the natural gas source. The second bullet, so 67% of on-road transportation emissions are from commercial vehicles. So as I mentioned before, there's some opportunities in local government to try and get people to change their habits or change the vehicle that they drive. But the largest area in that sector is the commercial vehicles, which is a little tricky for local government to kind of have an influence on those switches. Solid waste, as I mentioned, includes historic garbage deposited at the 2 landfills located in the unincorporated county, and that makes up a lot of the solid waste emissions that are generated. And then in the off-road equipment off-road equipment sector, 25% of that sector, which was 8% of the whole, comes from lawn and garden equipment. So you may have heard some of the jurisdictions, both in the county and around the Bay Area, have started to ban the use of gas-powered lawn equipment, and that really is targeting that sector. So it's 2% of the whole 2% of the whole pie, and 25 and 2% as well as of this 8%. So the last bullet on here, 46% of agricultural emissions are from off-road equipment. So that's looking at things like tractors and other off-road equipment that's used in the agricultural sector. That makes up most of the emissions in the agricultural sector. Other categories in there, however, are fertilizer and things like grazing and other things that give off emissions in that sector. So where do the emissions occur? So this is looking specifically at the different jurisdictions and seeing where the emissions are coming from. And you can tell that there's a lot of emissions from the population centers. So the city of Napa has the largest population. They also have the greatest share of the emissions at 43%, followed by the unincorporated county at 31%. And we'll see in another slide the breakout of the sectors with the different jurisdictions. So that's an interesting one to look at because there is some difference between especially the unincorporated county and the incorporated cities. The next one is American Canyon at 16%. So that's the third largest one, and then it's followed by the smaller cities. So this is showing the different jurisdictions at the bottom, and then the bar charts are showing the different sectors of emissions. So you can see on the far left, Napa has a really big slice of that on-road transportation, and that's because they're a population center and there's lots of people moving up and down the valley and out of the county from the city of Napa. And you can see American Canyon also has a large sector of on-road transportation. The county, their largest sector is solid waste, and that's because of those two landfills. And then it's followed by agriculture and building energy, it looks like. So, and just to note, just in case you watched the Climate Action Committee meeting in September, there have been some updates since then, and there were a number of updates between September and our final versions in November. And it was a shift in really building energy. So the building energy data was off a little bit, and it was making the building energy sector look too big. So when we reduced that sector, of course, all the other ones, grew a little bit and changed those pie charts. Okay, so how has the region in general fared? So this is a comparison between the 2005 inventory data from 2005 and then the 2019 inventory. And just to note, for this inventory, typically we would look at a year or two back instead of 3 years back in 2019, but we didn't want to look at the year 2020 because of the pandemic. There were such big changes. So we wanted to look at the last kind of typical year, which is what we're getting back to with emissions. So since between 2005 and 2019, we've seen a 26% decrease in on-road vehicle emissions, and that's great. And a lot of that is increases in those the fuel efficiency of vehicles, and also the switch to electric vehicles. And there's also been a 34% decrease in building energy emissions. And a big part of building energy is that the grid getting cleaner for electricity. So that's where we've seen a lot of a decrease in there, and also energy efficiency. Solid waste has seen a 17% increase, and that's not surprising given the two landfills within the county that continue to give off emissions. So this is a lot of numbers, but this is just, if you want to come back and look at this, this is showing kind of all the details in metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. So you can see American Canyon is on the left with a total of 189,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. And the other jurisdictions are, it varies based on their size. You can see that some of the sectors, there's fluctuation in who has a larger emissions amount. But we already looked at American Canyon is kind of right in third. Okay, so this is the
Wait, Deborah, can we go back to that for just a minute?
Yep.
Thanks.
Oh, what was that?
Just to the previous slide for a minute.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. I wanted to look at the emissions per capita and per service population.
Okay, great.
I just wanted to see where we are. So it looks like, okay, it'll take more time to dive into that, but I just was curious.
Yeah, and this is good. I don't have another, think I have another slide on this. I might have some detail actually on the next slide. But
Okay.
yeah, emissions per capita. So American Canyon does end up in the middle. You can see the unincorporated county is very high on emissions per capita, and that's because the unincorporated county has a lot of emissions because of that, the landfills, and there are other, lots of large buildings in the unincorporated county, the solid waste, and then a small population to kind of support that large amount of emissions. So the unincorporated county is very high. American Canyon at 9 is just below. That's actually a little bit under the average for the state of California. I think the state is 10.1, if I remember correctly, for emissions per capita. So that's great. That's a little bit below it. But you can see Napa being a population center. They have a much lower emissions per capita, and that's because some of that movement is within the city, and that's really like there's more people to spread out the emissions per capita when you have those denser populations like the city of Napa has, which you can see kind of penalizes some of the smaller jurisdictions. St. Helena, we wondered about that because they are the highest, and we think it's there's just a lot of kind of travel to and from St. Helena that we're picking up, and that's why they have a higher per capita, and they're such a small population center.
Thank you.
Okay. So this does have a little bit of information on that. So on-road transportation for American Canyon is about half of the emissions. And when looking at that, we determined, because it's the second most populous city, that makes sense. And also the proximity to the Bay Area means that more people in American Canyon could potentially be driving into the Bay Area and kind of doing longer commutes and things like that. We talked about the emissions per capita at 9, the on-road emissions are 2.5, and the total emissions in 2019 are 189,156. So you can see this is pretty similar to the overall regional emissions, with on-road transportation at about 50, and then building, energy, solid waste. Agriculture, of course, is very small in American Canyon and is much larger as in the region as a whole. But you can see the breakout there. So what will the future look like? So this is going back to looking at the regional view. We didn't look at this for each of the jurisdictions, but with federal and state legislation, the things that we know are coming, things like increases in vehicle efficiency and the push at the state level to switch to electrification of cars and electrification in buildings. We will see, at this point, we're estimating that we will see a 5% decrease in total GHG emissions by 2030. On-road transportation and imported water will see the biggest decreases of 22% each. So on-road transportation, that's great. Imported water is so tiny that you can't even see it on this chart. So a 22% increase or decrease is great, but is very small there. And that decrease is really the continuing cleaning of the electricity grid, and because there's a lot of electricity that goes into moving imported water throughout the state, so that's where we're really seeing the savings there. Without state and federal legislation, we would see a 17% increase in total emissions. So with that, the total, it brings it down 22% with all of those state and federal legislations that we anticipate will have an effect by 2030. But this does leave, we know many of the jurisdictions have a goal of zero net carbon or something to that effect by 2030. So there's a long way to go from where we are with the state and federal legislation. There's a lot for the jurisdictions to start working on. And there's a lot of opportunity, which is great. And I think that's it. So that was a lot of information. I will stop sharing. I'm happy to take questions and go into more detail on any of those slides that we just discussed.
Great. Thank you. Jason, do you want to say anything before I ask for questions?
Only wanted to add a little bit of more context around the on-road transportation. Correct me if I'm wrong, Deborah. I believe when they were looking at the trips on the highway in particular, that they were able to do some origin destination work, and so that the trips that were localized to American Canyon kind of counted for the full effect of the greenhouse gases trips that had an origin or a destination in American Canyon kind of counted as half, and that vehicles that never started or stopped in American Canyon did not, count against the American Canyon greenhouse gas number, that they were able to kind of sort that data out. So there was always, there's always a lot of concern about transportation and the highway, and then the percentage of vehicles on the highway that don't have a relationship really with the American Canyon other than to drive through it, and what that might show up as far as our greenhouse gases and such. So correct me if I'm wrong, Deborah, but it seemed the consultants were able to do that.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's, the origin and destination.
So it's a way of saying this is really related to American Canyon. We're not being penalized or what have you from
Or through
commuters that
traffic.
are driving through.
Yeah, I know a previous analysis had us getting responsibility for everything passing through, so I'm glad to hear.
Oh, okay.
Though saddened to hear that that's already been filtered out. So, okay, questions?
Yeah, I have
Barry?
a few.
Barry?
And
Yeah,
I'm
speak
glad,
in the microphone.
sorry, thanks. Jason, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was curious about that, and I was wondering maybe they're getting counted twice too, because they come through American Canyon, go up through Napa, may go all the way to St. Helena. So how do you apportion that out, but if they're doing the origin and destination studies, maybe that works it out. On the 67% commercial vehicles for on-road, I was kind of surprised by that, because when I'm driving, mostly I see passenger cars. I see big trucks all the time, but I don't see like 67% are trucks and then just 33 or 30-something% are cars.
Yeah, so that's just that those big trucks are so much less efficient
Okay, I
than
thought that
the
might be
cars.
it.
So really, really, really significantly less efficient.
And just a comment about the landfill, I think we were rated for 25,000 metric tons, if I was right, which was a big chunk of what we produce in American Canyon. But I know that landfill's been closed, I think 15 years at least. And initially they were going to do a regeneration. They were going to try to burn the methane and produce power with it. And I was going to the Waste Management Authority meetings during that time, trying to advocate for the river trails. So I watched a lot of that, and then gradually it was going down, 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 so that by the time it actually was ready, there wasn't enough methane to make it economical, I think. And so
Oh, interesting.
I'm
Okay.
thinking that, that has actually been decreasing, and I don't know if that
Yes.
they calculated that in there, because it's been
That
covered.
is correct. They did calculate that in there. So the waste in place, just for both landfills, includes decaying waste from past years and from other jurisdictions. So if that landfill, just to be clear, both landfills, if waste is brought in from other jurisdictions, it's still decaying within the unincorporated county. So that's where it's being counted. So for American Canyon, because it is has been out of use for such a long time, those emissions are continuing to go down every year. So they're calculated, and we do know that they're decreasing, but it is still emitting a pretty significant amount. I think it's the landfill that's still in use is emitting a significant amount more, obviously. But there is some calculations done that do show it stepping down every year in the amount that it's emitting, but the fact that it's still emitting because it's still there.
And do you know if that includes the waste transfer station now, where all the garbage goes and then it gets loaded onto train cars and taken somewhere? I think Washington State. I know
So a lot of it goes, as I understand it, there's a big landfill in Solano County, and it looked like, when we were just reviewing the data again, it looked like quite a few of the jurisdictions take it to that landfill. So that waste is picked up on an emissions per ton of municipal waste generated. And then the vehicle emissions associated with that would be picked up by those commercial vehicles in the on-road transportation sector. So we do pick those up. There's no calculation of it, when it goes to the transfer station. But those are definitely calculated on an emissions per ton of waste generated in the jurisdiction before it moves to its final resting place.
It's a very impressive study. That's got to be a lot of difficult calculations. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Tara?
Hi. So I have a couple questions about how natural gas greenhouse gases are counted. So to start with, for like a wastewater treatment plant that generates methane, and then they have a flare that burns off that methane, is that considered neutralized and it doesn't count towards greenhouse gases?
That is a great question, and I will have to follow up on that. I'm looking at my notes. Let me just see what I have, if I have it counted in the wastewater sector. So the wastewater sector is a population-based formula for wastewater treatment plants and then septic treatment septic treatment systems. So I will have to, but I can't specifically answer how that flaring is actually incorporated. I think, you know, there's probably, I think it's calculated on like an average of the emissions from an average wastewater treatment plant, and then that's population based. So we would look at the population that was served by the wastewater treatment plant in American Canyon, and probably use that average, because we don't have the specific emissions generated at each individual wastewater treatment plant. But let me see if I can find out about that.
Okay. And then if we had, we don't flare at the landfill American Canyon? don't
There's
burn off.
nothing captured. Jason knows what it is.
I don't 100% know what they currently do. It's run by the Napa Vallejo Waste Management Authority. I see operations out there, and I've seen flares at times, so I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
But at other times I haven't, so I'm not sure exactly.
Okay.
When Keith
So I was-
Caldwell worked there, they used to burn the garbage every night. They would bulldoze the garbage out to the edge, set it on fire, and go home and let it burn overnight.
So I was wondering then if we had a flare at the landfill, would that neutralize that, what was it, 16% of emissions?
I think so. Thinking about it more, again, they're not going to have that much detail on that specific. So this is kind of, it's modeling for the, I would think, especially for the landfills. So things like the natural gas data, that is data that we specifically got from PG&E, the gas and electric data. So that is a snapshot of the 2019. But when we look at other categories, it's calculations based on different metrics. So, you know, some of it is really tight math, and some of it is a little, you know, we have to make assumptions on the treatment of waste and wastewater and make calculations based on that. So I would imagine that it's calculated based on, you know, a landfill that is not accepting waste. And there's metrics with that. And people are studying that who are much more technical than me, and the consultants. So there's a protocol that we follow, that we pull that kind of data from and calculate it based on the service population.
Okay.
The only other thing I want to add, this is an inventory, meaning it's modeling, it's trying to figure out, you know, different levels and estimates and that sort of thing. The process of developing potential solutions and ideas about what could make those numbers go down, et cetera, is just in its infancy, at least at the county level. And so particular ideas, you know, that folks here may have, that the CAC may have, or what have you, are going to require further investigation, right? And to your point, I don't know that there's a fine analysis of either the Napa Sanitation Plant or the American Canyon Wastewater Plant or the landfills. One area might be to drill into those operations and with a very, very detailed calculation, go from to figure those kinds of things out, and then kind of compare back to this inventory. These are much more, you know, sort of typical numbers responsive to populations and that sort of things.
Yeah.
They didn't come into our treatment plan or Napa Sands plan and calculate and measure with a great deal of specificity to the operations and everything else. And that may be a to-do thing that comes out of the CAC.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
I think it was a note from Leon Garcia that he's participating now as a member of the public.
Okay, so we're going to ask for public comment after we finish committee comments. Thank you. So Kim, do you have any questions?
Do not.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the presentation, though. It was very informative.
So Deborah, I just have a couple quick things, and actually I don't think I really have questions necessarily, but I listened to your CAC report last week, and so I got the first view of this, and I'm really excited about this inventory. Wanted to ask you, will the results, the drill down results, be available by jurisdiction, and are there data tables that will be in there that will show, you know, general assumptions?
The assumptions are in the inventory,
Okay.
and we have access to the data tables, so I think we could help if there was some specific data that you needed. Those are working drafts, so they're hard to share just because they are so detailed, but we can certainly pull information and pull, create charts and things like that that would be helpful. So I don't think, thinking back on the inventory, like it doesn't have that pie chart for each of the individual jurisdictions, but that's something that we can easily pull together to show the jurisdictions and for your own use.
Okay, great, thanks. And one thing you mentioned during the meeting last week about solid waste, and a lot of it's calculated based on the actual tons of solid waste picked up in a jurisdiction, right? So I just wanted to share that with the committee, that solid waste number, I think, probably is pretty solid, because it's a solid waste number, because it's actually based on measured data, whereas a lot of these other things are extrapolated from models. So, great.
That's correct for the waste generated. And we did go back and check the American Canyon number, and it is correct, and it's the number that we got from CalRecycle.
Great. Well, this is wonderful. Thank you so much. It kind of helps us get started as a new body looking at the sustainability things, to look at this first. Public comment, I think we have a couple people.
If you'd like to make a public comment on the presentation, please raise your hand. We have Leon Garcia in the audience.
Hi, Mayor Garcia, please go ahead.
Thank you. This evening, I'm not attending as mayor of American Canyon. I'm attending as a member of the community. So just to make that clear, that allows me to attend.
Oh, so I should say Mr. Garcia. Okay.
That works. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate the presentation. Just some information about the landfill. I serve on the, and how can I say this without crossing over the line? Anyway, the landfill does flare the methane gas, collects it, and we are in compliance. I understand they are in compliance with state regulations on that. There was at one point, I understand, enough gas to, because they had a generating plant on site that produced electricity off the methane gas produced by the landfill. So that has declined over time. And now it's just a matter of simply flaring what gas comes off. So we know methane gas is multiple times more damaging to the environment than just carbon dioxide. So we burn it, and we have to monitor it. Good to hear the traffic issues with greenhouse gas. Origin and destination, I think, are probably the best measure of contribution to that. I mean, let's sit down with Mr. Hawley some time ago as a member of the community. 50,000 cars a day were coming through American Canyon. Our contribution, the city's contribution to that, was about maybe 3,000, if I'm remembering right. So it's the traffic coming through town. And it's a question of where housing is available for workforce. You know, you can't afford to buy a house in St. Helena or Napa for a lot of the workforce. So you live elsewhere and drive through. The Napa Transportation Authority took an examination of cell phone between Fairfield and over in Novato Petaluma, where folks were coming because this is a State Route 37 issue with congestion. And found that a lot of it is just folks, they live one place, they can't afford to live where they work, so they drive through. And that's a big part of our problem. I'm encouraged to see if we can do more with issues of carpooling. Idling traffic in the city is an issue. I remember Transportation Authority in Napa Valley took up an issue of why does everybody have to be at work at 8? If we spread it out, then you have less idling and cleaner. So it never gained a whole lot of traction, but worth examining. Anyway, thank you for the presentation this evening. I'm visiting remote because I got a bit of a cold, as you can probably hear. And I'm visiting part of this conversation this evening as a member of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. We have a comment from Mario Valdez. Mario, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Mario.
Mario, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Mario Valadez. I'm a board member with the Napa County Bicycle Coalition and proud resident of American Canyon. One, thank you for that presentation around the GHG inventory for Napa County. I know the MPC scoping plan came out a few weeks ago with a lot of great information on GHG, and so I'm happy that the county is also reviewing its own inventory information. My main comment for today is that I'm excited. I've been part of the past few meetings with the culminating of the Open Space Advisory Council now including active transportation and sustainability, and also a recognized focus on active transportation and specifically bicycle and bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And I'm here to thank the Advisory Council for the work plan that it's been drafting and it's been working on, and also to advocate specifically for there to be reviews of street design and paving plans, specifically into the work plan. Other advisory councils throughout the county and also throughout the Bay Area for active transportation and for BPAC councils review paving plans and proposed bike infrastructure plans, and we want to make sure that that's also included in the work plan for this specific for the new OSATS commission. And so once again, thank you for the work that's been done so far, and we hope that that kind of input is being recognized within this commission. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mario. And do we have any other public comment?
That is all the public comment we have at this time, Chair.
Great, thanks. Any other comments?
Just the gratitude for Deborah for joining us tonight. Thank you, Deborah. You're our first presenter with this new body, so thank you.
Well, thank you very much for
thank
having
you.
me. It's great to be able to kind of share the information beyond the Climate Action Committee. So
That's great work.
inviting
Thank
me.
you. Before you leave, Liz, it looks like there's a couple of Q&As at the bottom. Is there anything specific to this item?
We can double check here. Let's see.
Deborah, good luck with the city.
Yeah, I think we
that's
covered
it.
those. Those were comments from Mr. Garcia.
Great. Thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay. Next is public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Do we have anything?
We did have one written submitted public comment from Kara Werner that was forwarded to all members of the committee, not quite yet, committee, and that will be included in the meeting minutes. If anyone else in the audience would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Looks like we have no other public comment at this time, Chair.
Great, thank you. Any agenda changes? Looks like we're all good, okay. Okay, we have a consent calendar approving the meeting minutes and approving the meeting calendar. Do we need to remove anything to discuss on either of those things?
Those are two separate items, Chair, so if we could have a motion to approve each one.
Okay,
Thank you.
so on the meeting minutes, any?
I'll move to approve the meeting
corrections?
minutes
Okay,
for November 2nd.
I second.
Motion doesn't.
okay, so we have a.
Jared, just a
Yeah,
point of
sorry.
clarification. A singular motion can approve all of the items on the consent calendar, so it's just a single motion, isn't it?
Okay, so as long as everybody's fine with the meeting calendar, we can approve them together. If there's a meeting we can't attend, do we need to address that now or just?
Nope.
Okay. So, do we need to revise the motion?
It can be as simple as make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Okay,
Before we do, do we have a copy of the meeting calendar? Because I
Yeah,
didn't
it's-
see it today.
It's-
I might have missed it on when I went through the agenda.
Page 7 of the packet.
7. Give me just a second here.
Following the council's practice, they do not have meetings the first week of July and the first week of January.
Yeah, so it's mostly the Wednesdays, first Wednesday. It follows that.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'll move that we approve the consent calendar.
and Kim, are you seconding?
I second.
Okay,
Yes.
and are we doing voice or?
We have to do a roll call vote.
Okay, thank
We
you.
need to do- okay. Committee member Hester Williams,
I approve. Yes.
committee member McClinton Horner,
Approve?
committee member Christian,
Yes?
and Chair Matson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to business, it's the draft reauthorization resolution and the fiscal year 2022-23 work plan.
Thank you, Chair. And starting on page 8 of the packet is the staff report and kind of a long winding road that we started way back last spring, but we've reached kind of the conclusion point with that. And so took some of the changes that we brought forward at our last meeting, kind of went through it with the group and incorporated those changes into the resolution that's in the packet here. It's still called a draft resolution because until the council acts on it, it's still in draft form. But the intent is to bring this resolution to the council for adoption, and then so the resolutions on page 11 and 12 and 13. And then on page 14 is the work plan for the balance of this fiscal year. Again, taking some of the comments from our last meeting, adding those items in there, and we get to show up with the checkbox of already completed. I guess we didn't even put that on. Oh yeah, presentation on the greenhouse gas inventory, so we can show up to council and say we've already accomplished one of the items on the work plan. So anyway, the council staff would be recommending that the council approve these two items at the December 20th council meeting.
Okay, so can we split these and first ask if there's any comments on the resolution first, and then we'll
Sure.
go to the work plan, and we might have to bounce back and forth, but, so first of all, does anybody have any comments on the resolution?
Yeah, I knew.
And Barry has comments?
I went first last time, so.
He went first last time, so Tara, Kim, do either of you have comments on the resolution? Resolution this is not the resolution. There's, Kim, there's another document that you don't have that we do that would be the draft, the municipal code section that would be created when we become a commission. So
We'll tackle that in a second.
we'll
in our
tackle that
next
differently.
steps.
Just
That
Tara was
just more
looking at that
FYI.
instead of the other one. So I just wanted to tell Kim that we have this document that she doesn't have. Is there a way to send it to her?
Can you put it in the chat? Oh, no, there's no chat.
We can kind of talk through it. It's really, we'll cover that kind of at the end as we talk about our next steps, but it's not substantive and it's not something we're going to be bringing back, that part. So I just wanted to kind of show you what we're going to be doing. I don't know that we have a version of it at the moment that we can send, but it's more of an FYI. It's not part of the action tonight.
It basically takes the PCS municipal code section and just replaces it all with open space OSATs.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
That's really,
Yeah,
I
so
think,
the main difference, among the differences previously between PCS and OSAC was the fact that PCS was in the municipal code, and OSAC was not. And so what the council had wanted, this notion of equal standing and bringing this body up to a full commission, a full paid commission. So contingent upon the council blessing the resolution and work plan on the 20th, our next step will be more bureaucracy. In this case, getting the Open Space Advisory Active Transportation Commission into the municipal code. When we do that, we adopt an ordinance, the council adopts an ordinance, and you kind of set in stone, if you will, literally you're changing the code, the American Canyon Municipal Code. So it actually takes 2 readings, a first reading and then a second reading. And we're proposing to do that in January and February. It's not very substantive in the sense, Parks and Community Services already exists in the municipal code, and there's gonna be a lot of copying and pasting. We're gonna create a new title and chapter, and it's copy and paste, change the name, and a couple little words will be different, but it'll, it's kind of that boilerplate legalese, bureaucracy, and that kind of thing. So we just wanted to point out, as we're talking about next steps, we're not going to be bringing back the ordinance, and we're not going to be bringing the municipal code back to this body because there's not any real substance there. And so we just wanted to elaborate further on what the next steps would be. You'll be seeing things, municipal code changes, what have you. It's your basic kind of paper trail. And so didn't want to surprise you when you come back in February and you're, what is the council doing all these hearings? Why is the council changing municipal code? What's all that about? So that's what this is about.
So would it
I
be
understand.
possible for me just to text her a picture of it? Or is that not,
Sure,
not appropriate?
that's fine.
Okay, Kim, I'm gonna text it to you at Street
You can
Pages.
text her a picture.
Okay.
Well, we can
That
send
sounds
this.
good.
We can send this to you all after the meeting. You won't be taking action on these red lines. It's not an action you'll be taking. So we can send it to you afterwards, and you can more clearly see what we're doing. But it is 95% replace and find and replace.
Yeah,
so,
it's-
with the name change. So
Yeah, you'll see it's pretty straightforward there.
yeah.
Okay, so Tara, you had some comments on the resolution? Okay, and Barry has some. Kim, no? You're good?
So we are talking about the reauthorization resolution?
Yes, the reauthorization resolution.
I may have a comment after I hear the comments from Barry.
Okay.
And Tara.
So Barry, you do get to go first after all?
I may have a comment after I hear my own comment. Just kidding. So I have no problem with the boilerplate and the designations, but within the resolution, it says council discuss the roles and responsibilities of OSAC.
Can you talk into the mic? And are you talking about the staff report now?
Well, it's under the heading reauthorization resolution.
So you're in the staff report rather than the authorization.
What page are you on, Barry?
9.
Yeah,
Staff report.
second
Yeah.
paragraph or third paragraph, it looks like, huh? Fourth?
Yeah, well, it has to do with roles and responsibilities, and it says that we refined the reauthorization resolution to be consistent with council's intentions. So somewhere in here it says that we will review and comment on projects that are presented to us by staff. I met with Cara Verna and Carlota Sainato of the Napa Bike Coalition. And I met with them because I wanted to understand what their professional opinion is on the best practices for bicycle commissions.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do they work? What do they deal with? How do they advise? What questions do they ask? What's a really good bike commission look like, and what do they do? And they came back again very strongly with this idea that it's really critical that we have access to planning and design. What I'm concerned about is that the projects are presented to us kind of like spoon-fed to us, half an hour before midnight, and that we end up just rubber stamping them. And what Cara and Carlota told me is the other bike commissions all get really involved ahead of time. They collaborate with city staff. They work together and they look at what's the best way to go forward. I also don't really have clarity on how projects are added to the CIP, how are priorities determined, how to advise city council on those things ahead of time. So at the point where it could have an effect, rather than just waiting till it's pretty much a done deal. And we know how that works. It's, well, here it is. And there's pressure on you to approve it, but you never really had what you would consider good input, a good chance to actually make a difference or affect it. And so it seems to me what City Council told to us, they wanted us to work on the work plan, but they also, there seemed to be a 2-2 vote, and Leon broke the tie, and it was whether or not the City Council would tell us, here's what we want you to do and how we want you to do it, or would we as a commission say to City Council, here's what we think we should be doing and how we want to do it. And I think that second view won out, that we are going to present to City Council our idea for what our commission can do. And that ties into what I asked Kara and Carlota about, what are the best practices? What would be the best way for us to function as a bicycle committee? And it occurred to me, American Canyon has a planning commission. So most cities have one. The county has a planning commission. And what happens if a developer decides, I want to develop my property? They might go to building and planning and say, okay, I got this plan. And they might meet with the development director. And then at some point, probably pretty early in the process, they're going to end up before the planning commission. And then the planning commission, which is an advisory commission, is right there at the beginning of the planning and design of that project. So they're talking about circulation element, housing element, parking spaces, the actual design of the building. And there's input from the planning commission at that level. So it's not unprecedented to have an advisory commission at the planning and design stage, but I'm wondering what's the equivalent process for public infrastructure improvements. So let's say we know our bicycle network is getting there pretty good, but it's not built out yet. There's a lot of opportunities. There's not enough money to do everything at once. So there's priorities we have to decide on. What's the most bang for the buck? What's the best project to do at this time? What are the citizens telling us that they have problems? What's the bike coalition telling us? What are other bike groups? What's our own experience riding bikes and walking? What do we feel is it more important to push for a pedestrian bridge over Highway 29? Or should that money go to safe routes to school? Or should we build out the Vine Trail, which is kind of the spine and the main network first? Or try to do them all at a time and then just, but there's a lot of questions that could come up. And so it seems to me that we could be doing that same function that Planning Commission does for development projects, but we would be doing it for public infrastructure projects, like, and the same up at Newell. You know, what's important up there? Do we want to harden the trails so that we can have you can use the trail within a week after the rain, or does it stay mucky for 2 or 3 weeks, or even all through the winter? Do we want to focus on erosion, on sediment getting washed into the stream, the habitat and the environment? So I think that's what a purpose that we could fulfill, and that's what I would want to fulfill. And I want to present that to City Council, and I want to say, look, this is what I think we can be doing and we should be doing, and that's why we want to have input at the earliest stage. And I would like, the vision for me would be that we're all collaborating, and maybe we do a summit once a year and all the commissions get together with staff and with City Council, and we kind of say, okay, here's where we're looking at for the next year. Sort of like the State of the City address is, you know, you kind of give an update. But this would be like a preview and say, okay, here's where we're going. These are the kind of projects we think we want to work on. What does everybody think? Let's try to, you know, get as many people, at least among our groups, our commissions, committees, advocates, staff, City Council, and sort of, because I know it has to be planned. I know it's got to follow a process, and I know you've got to have the money to do it, and then you have to argue about the money later on. But I think that our commission could be valuable that way in advising ahead of time, down the road, and maybe it's 2 years out or 3 years out. But that's the kind of things that I would want to do. I would feel uncomfortable just waiting until a project is picked by city staff or whoever decides on it and then brings it to us and says, what do you think? Well, it's kind of, I mean, the question's already been answered. That decision's already made. We're going to go ahead with this, right? Rather than with this. And we're not going to even have a discussion on what are the community values, what's the benefit of doing this one first or that, or all that. So I know this is kind of long-winded, but I feel uncomfortable with going along and saying this is our resolution, that we're just going to comment on projects that are brought to us by city staff. And I think Kara Werner's comments today that were submitted earlier and are in the record, I thought Kara spoke very well on it, the reason why. I can't advise city council unless I understand what the project is and see it ahead of time and look at the possibilities. I mean, what am I going to be able to catch at the last minute? The city staff are very competent, and they're going to have it together, but the decisions have already been made, and the priorities have already been decided upon by the time it gets to us. So I'm holding out here and I'm not sure whether to not vote for this or just vote for it and then try to clean it up before city council and make the same speech, that this is what I think we can be doing, what we should be doing. If we're just here to rubber stamp things, then it's like, what's the point?
So I'm wondering if there's some wording that you'd like to add to the resolution that would reflect that? I mean, that was one thing that I was thinking, that we had this similar conversation last meeting about how we would be able to look at plans coming forward. And I think it's the same theme here. Anyway.
There was a lot to unpack there, Barry.
I know.
And I got to start by correcting some facts. So every city in California is required to have a planning commission per the government code. It can be a zoning board. It doesn't have to be a planning commission per se. We're required to have a general plan. We're required to have a zoning code. The planning commission does not act an advisory in the same way that PCS and OSATs will do to the council. They are distinctly different. The planning commission acts as a final authority in some cases, and then they act as a recommending body. But procedurally, they are part of an administrative record, and they function in a much, much different capacity than either PCS or OSATs does. There is not an equivalent to a process where this body would act in any kind of either quasi-legislative or quasi-judicial manner and take final action or anything like that. And so they're just markedly different. Developers sometimes come to the planning commission and get final approval for stuff and never even go to the city council. And so that, again, you're talking about private property rights, you're talking about capital investment, you're talking about really night and day sorts of things. What I would point to in the resolution is, and this shows up now on page 12, the bottom of page 12, we consolidated some of the grant nomenclature and words and some of the other things that were spread out in a variety of places and really consolidated them into kind of a final action. This body would provide input on funding programs. That's what we meant by grants, but we didn't want to specify it to grants. It could be other types of programs. So that's what meant by the term funding programs. The annual capital improvement program projects, and you asked, I don't know how the capital improvement program works. Well, you're going to find out in April. And the plan is to, in April, to bring you a synopsis of the work that staff has done to date. That's before the city council acts on it. It's before the council has even seen the CIP. And so the annual capital improvement program projects, you're going to get a snapshot and a preview of what's going to be going to council. And there is the opportunity to have that discussion with staff to say, well, what about this project? What about those? What might we add those? Are you able to add those? What are your what other things are you thinking about?
What part of page 12 is this on that you're
the very bottom of page 12.
Therefore be it further resolved? Okay,
correct.
Yeah.
It's kind of a catch-all, and thank you for pointing it out, because I hadn't noticed that.
It's a catch-all because it didn't just apply to active transportation, it applies to open space efforts too. So that's and it could apply to the sustainability efforts in the context that there might be a CIP project that would relate to sustainability. In fact, I guarantee there are. So we've defined broadly what the open space, what the OSAT's efforts are around active transportation, open space, and sustainability. And so to the extent there are portions of the CIP that relate to that, the plan, and I say April because that's March is too soon because we're still developing the draft, and by the time we get to April, we're going to have something that feels like a final draft, and then we'll be going to this body. The annual 5-year capital, so that's an annual CIP, meaning that's a project we expect to get done in the next fiscal year. We're required to have a longer range document, a 5-year CIP, and that document's actually required to go to the Planning Commission, and we did last year. So again, another role that the government code says the Planning Commission has to be involved in because they have to make general plan consistency findings, and this body would never be involved in general plan consistency findings. So so I wanted to kind of point, there's that annual process in April where you will see the work that we've done and be an opportunity to provide some recommendations, provide some comments. So here's some feedback on that. We got even more specific in the next sentence, and we talk about the design documents. And what's meant by that is the projects that we're working on, you're going to be able to provide an input on those design documents. We didn't get specific about every step of the way at 0%, 10%, 15%, 20%, whatever. We didn't. Sometimes there may be at the milestone documents, and other times they might not. And what we kind of talked about at the last meeting is that projects, that there's this feedback loop. There's this expectation from the council that there's involvement from this body. How much is the right amount of involvement, too soon or not enough, is always going to be subject to interpretation. The council will want involvement because they say they want involvement. Does that mean they want you involved in 20 times at every little milestone along the way, or they want you to see it once? It's going to depend on the project. It's going to depend on the nuances and the complexity. And there's going to be a feeling out period of what the right cadence and the right approach is going to be. We don't think we're know-it-alls, and we do appreciate, and I say we, being the former Public Works Director who usually does the design documents, the engineers don't, the Public Works folks don't think they're know-it-alls, and they do engage the public, and they do engage experts, both paid and volunteer. So, they will continue to do that, and this body will serve in that capacity as doing that. There will be some projects that are more run-of-the-mill and won't come to this body. And then there are other projects that have a complexity to it that will. So, the only people that will decide whether the right cadence is being followed and the right interaction is too much or too little will be the city council as they evaluate how myself and the staff that I supervise, how we operate with the various bodies that we work with and the work product that we get done. And so they're the ones who say it's the right amount or not the right amount, and they'll let me know. The only other aspect I want to get into is around priorities, and it is the council that sets the priorities, and it isn't any of the advisory bodies. It's not even the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission doesn't do anything to set priorities, and these bodies don't either. It is very much a role of the city council. So if we're in a place where you as an individual think the priorities that the city council is putting forward are not good for the community, your opportunity is to address the council on Tuesday night at 6:30 and to address them with what you think the priorities should be.
And does the city manager have a say in the priorities too? Because what you talked to about was sorry to hear that.
I don't have a say in what the priorities are. I don't. It's a unique relationship that I have with the council. I don't tell them what the priorities are. We suggest and we collaborate and we work on things, and when they define what priorities are, it's my job is to tell them the implications of that, and I do it without judgment. But I don't say this is a priority, that's not a priority, and that's just not the relationship that I even have with the council. So
I think I got confused by the delineation previously between policy and execution. You're running the city, so you have, and the city council can't get involved and interfere with you running the city, but the city council gives you policy guidelines. So I didn't know if this was a prerogative of the city manager to say, I want to do this project or that project instead. And
no, we come with a list that is based on what we hear from the community, what we hear from advisory bodies, what we hear from council and other venues, what we know, regulatory changes, development changes. Like we all of these inputs, all these variables go into the cauldron that we're looking at, and then we pull out our best estimate of what reflects the council's priorities. And then they decide, yes, that list or that 1, 2, 3, that hierarchy is how we want it, or it isn't. And we saw that actually with PCS, for example, as we sorted out their annual work plan. We had on there an item related to the Clark Ranch master plan, and they said, that's not a priority in the remaining part of this fiscal year, so take it off. And so we were hearing things and working things, and we had come up with with an idea, and there was a more very, very relevant and recent example where they said, no, just take that off for this limited period of time. So it isn't. The council doesn't rubber stamp things that I come up with. They have very much their own perspective on what they want to do. My goal is to bring them something that they say, yes, we want to do it, but their approval of something isn't because they're rubber stamping it. It's because they've agreed with what we want to do and what that is. And if not, they put out the veto pen and we start writing. So
I kind of asked the same question at the Active Transportation Advisory Committee meeting last week, and I was kind of surprised. It turns out there's a very diverse array of ways for projects to make it into the CIP. I don't know if they call it a CIP, but MBTA, sometimes it's staff, sometimes it's the board of directors, sometimes it comes from the committee, the advisory committees. So for me, as long as there's a variety of ways that I can, my voice can be heard.
yeah.
And I don't know if this is new. I just missed it, the bottom paragraph that you had. But
I
it
could have
does
done
talk.
a better job at the beginning of this item by saying we did make some changes, places where there was redundancy with open space and active transportation and sustainability, where there were redundant bullet points, we consolidated them into a singular place, because we didn't want to be clumsily repetitive and to have that sort of machine-like feel. So that was what was meant by this last one, to consolidate it and to make it much more broad and much more open-ended than listing all of the grants and so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, it talks about capital improvement project design documents, and I think that's probably what Kara and Carlota are, because I don't really know, but I'm listening to them, and so I feel better about it now, and
Okay.
I could support it. So thank you for the extra time to explain that.
Thanks. That's it for you on the resolution right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so Kim's got her hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask, as I often do, for clarification on this, what Director Holly just said about the input from the commission. And so I guess I'm having a little trouble just reading the further resolved sections. So there's a section that refers to open space, there's a section that refers to active transportation, and a section that refers to sustainability. The active transportation section basically is the section where, when you say updates to the citywide plan, updates to the citywide pedestrian, well, the bike plan, the pedestrian plan, and active transportation development standards, what you're saying, and my question goes to the structure of this document.
Mm-hmm.
These areas basically are connected to this last further resolved passage.
Correct. Correct. Another way, maybe, Committee Member Hester Williams, would be to, at the bottom of page 12, we kind of have this more all-encompassing, now therefore be it resolved. The prior three are really talking about specific areas: open space, active transportation, and sustainability, and there's bullet points under each of those. This one at the bottom would apply to all of those bullet points. All of those bullet points are quote unquote open, or quote unquote OSAT's efforts, right? They're all of those things in that purview. So all of those things could show up under this last piece, and rather than having a line like this in every one of those, we wanted to consolidate it into a singular kind of catch-all.
Yes, I understand now. And so this is basically the be it further resolved, and I'm happy to see it as the first catch-all, phrase that you're using in the addition, be it further resolved, that our role as a commission is an advisory role, is I want to use the word consultation. I actually do want to use the word consultation. So do you see this as the commission, what's being, communicated here is that supporting the staff efforts is a, a, a consultation role?
Yeah, I think
Do you
that's
see a difference linguistically between consultation and advisory? And I'm being a very nitpicky English teacher right now, and I really apologize for that.
Very good.
I would say, and you notice we've taken the word advisory out of the name of the body. I would say this commission will act in an advisory role to the council, right? And the thoughts that you present to the council are going to be advisory, and that will be after consultation that you've had with the staff as we bring things forward to you. And so that's the distinguishing characteristics that I would make, is that we're bringing documents, plans, ideas, et cetera, to this body for consultation after we've done a bunch of work, but not before it's all complete, right? Like we're bringing an iterative process, we're bringing for consultation by you, with you, and then we're gonna take that feedback and do one of a variety of things with it. It's all in the record. The feedback that you give is all in the record. That record will be, in some form or fashion, be represented to the council in a transparent way. I don't know that it'll be so far as, all of the comments and all the meetings. It will sometimes be summary, but for example, if we brought something to you, we brought a design of something or a plan of something, and we weren't on the same page. We think it should be done this way. This body had some thoughts, and we said, you know what? We're not comfortable. We're not going to incorporate those changes. We appreciate the collaboration and the consultation by you. We're not going to make those changes. What we would bring back to the council in that scenario is a very transparent record of what had occurred, so that we went to the OSETs. OSET said we wanted a 5-foot wide bike lane on this road. The design that we're bringing to you, that we want you to award the contract for, does not have that. They recommended it. We couldn't do it for X, Y, reasons. The council will have that. They will have the advisory notion that this body did. They will know we went through the consultation process. And if the council says, staff, you're crazy, we think they're right, do it, then we get that direction from the council and do it. Or the council will go, thank you for the input. Thank you, staff, for going to the consultation. Thank you, commission, for the advisory piece. We're going to go this direction. And so that's how that plays out at the council level. And of course, if we're on the same page, the staff report looks different. The staff report says we went to the OSETs. They recommended XYZ change. We thought it was a great change and are glad to implement it. And then the council goes, great. That's everyone's going on the same page. So, and the council may look at it and go, you know what, we don't think it's a great change. We want you to go a different direction, and then we go on and we're doing a different direction. So, that's how that process works. In effect, like that's the procedurally how it works. Again, not like what the planning commission does, because it's a different, much more regulated and regimented process, but very, very comparable to what we would do with PCS. As it relates to the things that are in their purview. So, so there will be that same kind of feedback loop with them, and we would bring that kind of combined effort then to planning commission and or council, particularly that kind of development project, with noting what these bodies felt about what was presented to them and whether we incorporated suggestions or didn't, and why. And so I think that's the value in the process, Barry, because it's not just you coming on a Tuesday night to the council. It's part of a record. It's part of the public document. You're given a more advanced status as a body as to what your perspective is, other than just John Q. Public, on Tuesday night at the podium.
That's actually very helpful for me. Thank you very much. Personally, that clarifies the language, the structure of the language. And just one really quick question, and that is, so we do have, as a body, the potential to influence the design.
Very much so, and both the potential, and it comes with the responsibility that comes back on to staff. If we've gone through that consultation process and we're going to make changes, then that's great. If we've gone through the consultation process and we're not going to, staff now is going to have a bit of an onus to explain why. We have the onus to be transparent about the process that was gone through, and an explanation as to why the suggestions aren't implemented. We think you should decide. Well, we don't have grant funds to pay for that $1 million thing that you think was a great idea. So and I'm being a little facetious, but my point is, the onus then comes back on staff to be transparent about what occurred and to explain why some or all of the recommendations or ideas or what have you are not being implemented. And so that it isn't just somebody from the public on an individual basis. It is part of that whole process, that whole record.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. I feel satisfied with this document with that additional clarification. So, I really thank you for taking the time to clarify that.
Great, thanks, Kim. Tara? Anything? Okay, so I have 2 questions, and this has been really helpful. I'm really glad you pointed out that be the therefore all that in the bag of chips section. And I think that as we go through the process in April of looking at the CIP, I think it's going to set the stage for us moving forward to know where we are, what's happening on design projects, and so I'm feeling much more confident about that. My question on the active transportation section, the first 3 bullets are updates that have to happen at certain times in the calendar, right? There are things that routinely are updated, or just the first 2?
None of them have a required cadence of update. Traditionally, the bike plan's on a 5-year cycle. The pedestrian plan is newer, and I think we've only had one. There might have been a more updated one, so it's not even so as well established to even have a cycle. It tends to line up with when funding becomes available, and we tend to use outside funding, and we tend to coordinate that with NVTA, and they end up leading a lot of that, both of these efforts, actually. So I don't mean to have an overly meticulous answer, but the housing element is required to be updated every 5 years. There are some very specific requirements, and then there's more practical sorts of cycles that we're in. But you're right, they are cyclical. Okay. The development standards doesn't have any kind of a cycle to it.
So the development standard, is that have to do with design and specification of bike and ped paths and sidewalks, or does it have to do with the building code and infrastructure? What part of it is this?
The first thing that you said was what was we have an entire book of what we call public works standards. So these are we try to use standard means of construction and design as frequently as we can, so that they're easily repeatable, they're well vetted designs, et cetera. So we have those. There are design standards, and the ones we have right now are due for an update. They're some of the original ones. So we're in a process of updating them, and some of them include what you just mentioned, active transportation facilities. So ultimately, the council would give the Public Works Director authority to sign off on those design standards. Before we went to the City Council, we envisioned coming back to this body and saying, again, you don't care about pavement thickness. That's one of the design standards, but we're not going to be taking that to you. But there's a subset of these design standards that relate to active transportation facilities. And we would bring that subset to you and say, hey, here's this subset of this whole package going to council. Here are these design standards. And so there's not a cycle for doing that. It's more of like when we run into an issue more frequently that we then have to field fit or work through a development issue with, we go, is there a standard we could just do that so we don't have to come back and reinvent the wheel every time? It keeps us from having to do that.
Okay, so I like that. So would that umbrella of those design development standards incorporate some of the things that Planning Commission has run into when they're approving a project and they're thinking, wait, what bicycle amenities or active transportation amenities are required here? Would we cross into that territory as well, or would that stay over in planning?
Those sort of is my answer. And you might remember a couple of meetings ago when we were meeting with the council, we had actually come up with a suggestion of putting the active transportation stuff over at the Planning Commission for this reason. There are certain things, active transportation related, that are, I'll call them planning development standards, parking spaces per capita, bike parking spaces per capita, or per unit, that sort of a thing. That's not an engineering standard. It's a planning standard, and we hadn't actually contemplated those sorts of things coming to this body. And it's not to say that we couldn't, because
That makes sense.
yeah, we'll need to go back and kind of think about that. A lot of that is driven by the building code, but some of it is a local standard. So it's a fair point. What we were thinking of more concretely were the public works standards for the CIP projects and the development projects. How wide is your bike lane? How wide is the sidewalk? Those sorts of standards is what we were thinking about, these public works standards. I'm trying to visualize some of the planning design standards that I mentioned and how they are evaluated. And that may be an area, and it's okay to have overlap. That may be an area of overlap with the Planning Commission that might make some sense to have these bodies sit and kind of talk about that, because the Planning Commission is very much interested in having standards that they can implement rather than having to impose things on an ad hoc basis, because it makes everybody uncomfortable when it feels like you're just making up the rules. So that may be an area of opportunity where we can look at some of those planning standards, like I mentioned, and say, well, how do they get thought through and developed anyway? And might we have some iteration around that? I gotta check with Brent, and I don't have total familiarity on how those are created. So some of it's building code; it's kind of hardwired, but there are, and a lot of it is CEQA mitigation measures as well. Like there are a lot of CEQA mitigation measures that come up through the planning process. So I gotta kind of sit and think about that for a little bit. But
Okay.
I don't think I don't think this is so limiting as to preclude that consultation. But
Yeah, and we have the future efforts needed wording, so, but I just wanted to bring that up, because I wasn't sure if we wanted to put it in now, and it sounds like we could still work in this area, even though it's not in the resolution, because the future efforts related to active transportation is kind of a big umbrella.
yeah, I think the other efforts covers it, and yeah, I do. I think I would want to have a little better sense about those planning standards and where they come from.
Yeah, I don't know where they come from exactly, it's not my expertise.
I imagine they change a lot too, right? With so much other change going on that it's like
Well, you brought up the CEQA,
updated
that
all the
makes.
time?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these are CEQA recommendations or mitigation measures under CEQA.
Okay. That was my comment on the active transportation. And then when we get to sustainability, we as a city, I think, are just trying to get our head around what we're going to be doing in terms of sustainability. And we have 3 very specific plans here, but we don't have a general. And maybe that's fine, because future efforts probably takes care of that. But what we don't have is the ad hoc committee is continuing to meet in terms of they're working on getting the community engaged. They're doing a questionnaire. I went to one of their meetings. How do we as a commission work with the ad hoc committee? Do they become part of us? Do we work in, how do we handle that in the resolution? Because I think they're doing some pretty important work.
The third bullet point is the document they developed.
Document, yeah,
Right.
but
So
still
I think
looking at
it's
reading.
there. I mean, that's their work product that they're continuing to refine. So, to me, inherent in that third bullet point, if they're working on this plan, and this is an area, and it's this plan this is a plan somebody else is working on at the moment. To me, there's a direct link right there by identifying that interim plan. Secondly, that's a question we're going to have to ask the council because we didn't have a lot of guidance from them as to, and they are still sorting that out too. Just last night we were discussing Regional Climate Action Plan bullet point number 2. This came out of the meeting on the countywide meeting on November 30th, and the two representatives from Marin Canyon and everybody else were sent back home. Say, hey, what do you think about a regional plan? And go back, take the temperature of your bodies on that. So the council discussed that last night. The council is supportive of moving forward with a regional plan. The alternative being everyone do their own. So the council thought, okay, we'd rather just be part of a regional one. So they did have that conversation. The council had that conversation last night. So a lot of this particular area is going to have to be determined. And, you know, as the ad hoc committee, what is the future of the ad hoc committee, and what is its relationship with this body is a question we're going to have to ask the council. I don't know that we need to put that in the resolution, because I know we need to ask them, because I need clarity, and I think you all do too. So
Yeah.
I don't think we need to put that in this resolution, and the council knows there needs to be clarity there too. So
Okay. Thanks. Those were my two main things. Any follow-on questions from everybody? Anybody? Tara?
I know we've talked about this before, the all-encompassing definition of sustainability. The items here that are bullet points are all related to climate action. You know, there's a possibility of, you know, we're going to be talking about water conservation and drought. There's stuff we could get into, solid waste, and, you know, all of those kinds of things. Are we also thinking that that's all going to be part of future efforts needed?
it will. I really think as it relates to sustainability, this is not going to be the last resolution that relates to OSAD stuff, because of how ambiguous the notion is around sustainability and how broad of a term it is. We're going to have a subsequent resolution that gets a little more defined about what they want from sustainability. And so on your points, we are working on getting a presentation on kind of a combo between our 2020 Urban Water Management Plan and the Napa County Drought Contingency Plan. We're going to bundle them together as a presentation and talk about water conservation and its relationship to energy efficiency, which Deborah noted. The fact that PG&E's source of power is getting cleaner means that the water we're pumped to Marin Canyon has less of a greenhouse gas component to it than it did previously, but is all subject to how clean PG&E's power sources are. You know, so again, all that to say, water conservation is still important. Just because we're saving some GHG now doesn't mean stop conserving water. It's still very important. So, so we are working on a presentation. March is kind of what I got penciled right now. With the folks that we would bring in to do that. That'll be staff that will come and other staff that will come and present that.
Thank you.
Kim, anything else? Barry?
This action item?
It's, do we want to split this, or we want to, do you want us to do a motion on everything?
Yeah, so it's not an action item.
Okay.
Neither of these are action items. What I want to be able to do is to go to council on the 20th and say, we reviewed this with you. We're staff and the commissioner in agreement with this resolution. We recommend the council adopt it. So
Okay.
we're certainly happy to talk about the work plan.
Yeah, the work plan, then if we don't need to do a motion, I think we're all in agreement in support of the resolution.
Yeah,
so
I'm looking for someone who says, no, I don't. I'm looking for someone who's going to show up on Tuesday night, the 20th, and say, I never agreed to that. So, and I'm going to look kind of foolish. So
I can do that if you want.
You're taking volunteers. Okay, so next is the work plan, and this is the same list we had last time, or is it modified?
There are additions to
Okay.
it. And Newell Management Plan and Parks and Community Services Master Plan were already on there. We kind of modified the language around the capital improvement program. This is us saying, and it's going to be April, you know, we're going to bring the proposed CIP to you and the elements that relate to open space and active transportation projects. If there are sustainability projects, we would do that too. I just didn't list them here. And there are actually a couple. So we talked about trail accessibility and maintenance standards, and so that's something you know that we're thinking about, and we would be bringing back through this body. Item 5 we just did tonight, so we get to show up with the checkbox, which is always nice. Page 14. The Eco Center, the use permit. So when the proposed tenant for the former Courtyard Turn Eco Center project We expect them to be submitting a planning application for a use permit. And given the particular uniqueness of that project and that site and everything else, we'll be bringing that application after staff deems it complete, which is a legal thing. We go through a series of reviews at different bodies, and this will be one of those bodies that would say, here's the application, here's what we're looking at. It would eventually go to Planning Commission and Council. So that's all about number 6. Again, new open space trail being an example capital project with complexity and real direct correlation to this body. So when we have a series of design documents, this is going to be an iterative one. So we're not planning on bringing you 100% design documents. In this case, we don't know what milestone they will be, but our plan is to bring milestone documents to you, not 100% ready to go documents. So
For which item?
number 7.
7.
Right, because of the nature of the project, the complexity of it, and so forth. So that's what number. And I don't know what % complete they're going to be, but we'll be bringing probably 30%, 40% design that level, and then we'd come up with some of the next milestones. So, and then like I mentioned, on water, Napa County drought contingency plan. We're actually going to bundle that with urban water management plan too, but because you kind of have to tell both stories, but. That's what number 8 is.
Okay. So I'm going to ask for questions and comments first.
Pardon me.
Anybody have anything? I have some, I can launch in if you want a few minutes to think about it, or you have something, Barry?
A little bit. I mean,
Okay.
it doesn't talk about individual things, like for the Commerce Boulevard, that 0.2 of a mile, 1,000 feet. At some point, I'd like to discuss, does it make sense as a priority? Because of, if you complete that section, and if Green Island Road, the Class 1 goes in, that entire trail from Devlin all the way to Mini Drive in Vallejo would be sidewalk accessible. So that's a complete route that at least you'd be safe on the sidewalk. You'd
Yeah,
go
so-
American Canyon Road and cross 29.
Sure. On that particular one, the council's already weighed in on it, and they've already provided that direction to staff. And B, it's not complicated.
Yeah.
And so there's not a need to bring a 100% design document to you all that says there's going to be a stripe on the road. And so that's and the council's already provided the direction about they want that connection. So we don't need to bring back, hey, should we do that? That the council's already said we want that.
Yeah, so that
and
takes care of it.
I don't know that the design documents are going to be done by June. So again, this is through June, right? So what I'll say is on that particular project, for example, as we're working through the design and we, with this body, as we get into the next fiscal year and the next work plan, that's something we're going to want to be talking about in May and June. We don't want to, we want to be on the cycle of the budget and have our consultation with council in that May timeframe. So that we're ready for July, the next July. If we got to that place where the design of that project was now causing us some concern, like maybe what we thought was simple is actually a lot more complicated, or we had some new idea that we're going to do something completely different, then yeah, we might bring that new idea, that non-design standard, back to you and go, what do you think? But council's already said, yeah, we want something, and at this point, that's a stripe on the road, and some no parking signs, which the parking signs are already there. So
It's just a stripe, not a concrete barrier?
at this point, we're looking at class 2. Yeah, we're looking at stripe. So yeah, that's what the council is interested in. But we're continuing to evaluate it, and I don't know that the design document is going to be done by the end of June. So this may be a next fiscal year thing anyway.
Well, if we could put a concrete barrier, that would make it a Class 1, and that would make everything Class 1 or sidewalk for the entire route.
Yeah, no, and we understand that. I just to know where I am, I hate Class 2 lanes. I think Class 2 lanes are give a perception of safety that doesn't exist. So my personal preference as an engineer, although I don't do any engineering anymore, it's something that Erica does. We don't like to do Class 2. They are a distant second as far as what we want to do. If there's an opportunity to have an enhanced protected lane, then we're all about that opportunity. So we're still evaluating it. Concrete barriers and those things are fine. But if there's an opportunity to have a full class 1, that's what we're looking at. And that, which is, and an
But
example of
you're
that.
talking in class 2 though. A
Correct.
stripe is a class 2.
Yeah, correct. The reaction, the immediate reaction when council said we want something was, okay, yeah, class 2 will fit. And you put that kind of as a placeholder in your mindset of a design. Like the first thing you go, like, how achievable is the basic thing, the class 2? Yeah, it's achievable. It's wide enough, you put the stripe on. As we get to the final design of that, we're going, okay, I don't really like that minimum thing. I'm not really comfortable with it. I'd love to be able to do something better. And if we can get to that place where even the better thing is easy to do and it's just straight concrete and it's 10 feet wide, we're not going to need to bring that body here too, because we know what a 10-foot wide concrete sidewalk looks like. If we get to the place where we can't do any of that for whatever reason, if the drainage doesn't work, if the underground gas line is in the wrong place or something, then we might bring back what do you think about this kind of wild idea? But we're not envisioning that playing out that way. The example of that preference is on Green Island Road, right? The Vine Trail goes one direction, but the piece going west to Commerce, we said, we're going to make that a class 1. Why are we going to shift and change in the middle of in the middle of this industrial area and to go to something on street there? Make the whole thing, and we went through the property acquisition and all those pieces to make
I'm
that.
really
a class
glad you do too. I think that was a great move, and I applaud you for that.
Yeah.
I did see a nice example in Mill Valley, coming out of Mill Valley, out towards Highway 101, on the north end of Mill Valley, and it was little plastic stanchions that separated a class 2. But it really, there were a lot of people using it, and I was never big on those before, but it's like, wow, this looks like it's working, because it really tells the driver, I can't go there, I don't belong there. Stripe on the ground doesn't do that, but if there's actually something they would have to hit, then you're going to know that they weren't supposed to be there and that they did, because they knocked down all the stanchions, and people were using it. It looked like it would work good. And the other part of that is from ATAC meetings. They tell us that I think 50% of the population might be persuaded to go ahead and use a bike, but it would be if they thought it was safe. So that's the largest.
Perceived safety is the single biggest factor. That's the single biggest barrier for.
And that's the biggest group of undecided riders, 50%, that would be, okay, I'll go out there if I think it's safe. And so if it's class 1 or with some kind of barrier, and the sidewalks are safe, cars can't really climb the curb too easily. And so then you got the entire trail that you could say, okay, this is safe. And
It's why we insisted in front of the new elementary school that we insisted the school district put the full width of the sidewalk. They didn't really want to do that, but that's why we said, look, that whole stretch needs to be wide, because if we're going to have kids going back and forth on elementary school, a class 2 lane just doesn't make any sense there. So it's that exact thing. We know that perceived safety is the single biggest piece of that.
And the second one I had was the hardening of the trails. Ally did a great project up there, putting the gravel in, and there's some spots. I've noticed some places it's going to be wet after a rain because maybe the grading is wrong. But there's other places where the ground up above soaks in and you're going to have seepage, and that seepage could last for 3 or 4 weeks. And in those places, I think it's going to be hard. But, I mean, it needs to be hardened up. But number 4, trail accessibility and maintenance standards, I think that'll encompass all that. Maybe one thing more would be how we do this. Like it says update Newell management plan, but how do we do that? Are we going to look through the plan? Are we going to create a subcommittee? So I wouldn't mind trying to be more specific on what our actual process is going to be. And to update the Newell management plan and update the Parks and Community Services plan, I don't know that we're going to get that done in 1 year, in one fiscal year.
No,
I think it took longer when we did it to update the Parks master plan.
Many of these will be carrying over into the next year's work plan. 1 and 2, for example, will not be done by June. I guarantee that. And 6 probably may or may not be done by June either. So these are the things that are going to be worked on. They're not meant to be say we're going to be done by June with them. The how will be, again, staff and or consultants bringing work product, and at the appropriate milestone bringing it back for review and comment and iteration. With the Newell management plan, it's not going to be a final document that we bring to you. We'll bring a milestone documents where you think about kind of forks in the road a little bit. Like, you know, you don't want to get past too many forks in the road and be off in a place where people are uncomfortable and not agreeing with it. But you don't need to be at every step of the way. It's really at milestones or forks in the road where we go, we're not sure. We should get some input here on which fork we should take.
And then I think the last one is, I've just gotten interested in the whole pedestrian bicycle scooter conflict. A friend of mine, she's my age or a little older woman, and she was whacked by a scooter on the Embarcadero in San Francisco, broke 2 ribs. And I noticed an article online yesterday or the day before. A scooter driver in New York was sentenced to 3 years in prison. He hit a pedestrian and the pedestrian died, an older woman. And I think I mentioned this before, a regional director for Trek Bicycle on the East Coast, I met him through some family members. He told me that in the next 5 years, he's convinced that there'll be more electric bikes sold than regular bikes. So there's kind of an explosion of electric bikes, scooters, the batteries and all that. And I know Tammy Wong came out recently about the bicycles because she was riding along the wetlands edge, and there was the pedestrians, and we share the road. But I think it's going to take, I really think it's going to take some effort, and I hope that we can get ahead of it. I see it as a major issue. We're talking about it at the ATEC committee. I'd like to look at what are best practices, what kind of signage do we need to let people know, hey, if you hit somebody in this scooter and you kill them, you can go to jail for that. I mean, that was like, wow, I hadn't thought about that before myself. And I think it's, now that we're opening up trails, now that we got Devlin open, we're gonna open Green Island, you'll have a sidewalk or class 1 through the whole city. I think that the use of these trails has been held back because there was a barrier. You'd have to go on 29, and it is too crazy. So people weren't riding. And I don't know if there'll be a lot of people, but I expect there could be. And so I'd like to get out in front of that. And I think that's one thing that we can help gather information on. I don't know. The state actually, a state court ruled that there was, to get rid of a regulation that prevented the fastest e-bikes from going on trails statewide. It was a state regulation. And the court threw that out and said, you can't just limit them just because they can go fast. Maybe you can have a speed limit and say they're not allowed to go fast. But they just opened it up. And so I think there's going to be more of that. And I'd like to throw that onto the work plan. Now
at this
or in the
point,
future.
what I would suggest is, we're pretty close to the April-May timeframe where we're going to be back in front of council, and I appreciate the desire to get in front of something. This is a pretty full group. But having a conversation with council and getting a sense of where they are on that, is that something they're hearing from constituents? Is that something that they maybe want to be in front of, like you're talking about? Have them kind of weigh in on specifically something that's regulatory. It's going to result in enforcement. What's going to like the I would suggest having that conversation with them in April and May, and what would they think about putting it on the next work plan as something to do. They may or may not want to do that, but to me it would be a good thing to think about and suggest in April or May whenever we get in front of council.
And would you suggest maybe going to them at a public comment or informally talking to them about it ahead of time rather than?
No, part of the process that we're trying to reestablish is an annual consultation with the city council where we give them the next year's proposed work plan and say, we'd like to do this, in the next year. And here's, here, we're a little out of sequence because it's December, we're still talking about it. Ideally, this conversation happens in June.
It's only a few months, it's only 3 months till April, 4 months till April, so.
Right. So my point is, as we get in the April-May timeframe, let's remember this idea, and as we bundle the list of ideas for July 1, let's see where this shakes out, given the progress on some of these other things. And I want to have that conversation with the council. You're talking about a regulatory scheme, and what's their sense of it, and how important is pursuing a new regulatory scheme for them.
Okay, and I feel like Columbo, just one more. Trail accessibility and maintenance standards. When that discussion does come up, I'm going to bring up erosion control. the regrading project, the primary intent of that was to reduce sedimentation into the streams. And unfortunately, it appears, the evidence is very strong, that the project itself resulted in those 5 additional landslides, because the water course was changed through the placement of berms. And that was the intent of the plan, to restore the original drainage. But it forces water off the trail at those places, and those 5 locations, the hillside wasn't ready for the extra flow. Now it's a barren gulch, and the rain is going to continue flowing. It's essentially a seasonal creek now, and there's no protection for it. So it's counter to the whole intent of that program. And so in terms of, maybe that would fall under maintenance standards. I'll try to get it to fit in there. So on item 4, trail accessibility maintenance standards, maybe that's where that can be.
Yeah. So, and this kind of gets back into our question about what's a project and what's a policy. So number 4, the result of that is some kind of recommendation to council around a standard, or another way to think of a standard is a policy, right? So the question that we're going to be answering as we work through number 4 is, what levels of accessibility for different folks should we have at different trails? Are we expecting them to all have the same level of accessibility, or are there limitations on the expectation around accessibility based on the trail? When you go out to wetlands, for example, right, the very first section of that, whether it was repaved because of a sewer pipe that got put in previously, there were some potholes. So what's the expectation around accessibility or not? And legally, there's no requirement for accessibility in outdoor spaces. That it is a very, very, very low requirement as far as accessibility, but there can be a local desire to have accessibility in a variety of manners. So the whole wetlands trail, north to south, has a high level of accessibility, mostly due to the fact that it's pretty flat. It was, but it was easy to do, right? But nonetheless, there's a high degree of accessibility there. So there is. This is an example of providing input on a policy that the council would later adopt. It's not going to be, is this point up in the new open space, should that be fixed? That's not the question with number 4. The question with number 4 is, where should we have different levels of accessibility and that part of it? And then the maintenance standard, and accessibility isn't just ADA. It's not just, it's all levels of accessibility, right? So it's not just ADA, the very, very flat standards. It's the different gradations of accessibility. So what people with a low level of interest in fitness and capability can do versus rock climbing, sort of, super enthusiast kind of accessibility, and where might we, what different levels of accessibility might we have in those standards around it. And there are some areas where we're not going to have any expectation of accessibility. If you can go, and we happen to own the property and you're not precluded from being on it, there's zero expectation of, this is you and your best physical efforts to get across something. There are places where we're not going to have accessibility. And that then gets into the maintenance standards, because it's a question of when that accessibility, and this is, again, optional accessibility that we're providing, when that optional accessibility has been disrupted in some manner, what is the expectation around remedying that? And there are some instances.
That would be if the trail, if this erosion causes the trail to lose the road, maybe. So maybe what you're saying is erosion, but I'm thinking of erosion control in terms of habitat conservation.
Sure.
So maybe that doesn't fit in this item 4. Maybe it needs to be addressed separately. And
it will kind of depend on how it goes. But if, for example, if we decided, look, if there's going to be a washout in a trail and we've decided when that happens, we're not going to fix that, this document will need.
There's some questions about when you have a landslide, do you want to do something? We're the stewards of that property. Do we want to do something to reduce siltation into the creek, which goes into the river and goes into the bay? So I'd like to address at least the question. And if it'll fit in there somehow with maintenance standards, then that'll work for me. Otherwise, I would think, can we address it somewhere else?
I think it does.
Now
Hey,
I'm done, thank
You're
goodness.
done? Good job. Okay, so we have Tara and we have Kim and then we have me. So Tara's first.
Okay. I was wondering if our subcommittees belong on this list. For example, the grant, the Measure AA grant, and general plan.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah,
Are the subcommittees that we have people serving on, should they be on here too, like the Measure AA grant and the general plan parts?
or is that just part of
It's
the?
inherent. I mean, it's noted in the resolution as serving on those bodies. You know, as something you could do. We were really viewing this list 1 through 8 as something that would show up on a commission agenda next year.
Okay.
I don't know that listing the subcommittees. I mean, I guess you could, but I don't.
We don't have anybody on the AA.
Yeah, we do. Oh, no, we don't anymore.
No, Scott didn't go on, and
You're
I'm
on there for
representing
county.
for the county park district, so we don't have a OTSATS
I
member
don't
on
know
that.
that we need to list the subcommittees, because again, I was taking the approach of these are, you know, part of what we would report to council at the end of a particular work plan year would be, here's the stuff that was on the work plan, here are the check boxes, here's the stuff still to be done. And so the easiest way to do that is to go back to your agendas and go, yeah, we did, and you do it that way. So that's what I was kind of envisioning with this, the listing of the subcommittees. I'm not sure that we need to.
Okay. And another question, not really then about the work plan, but when we have people serving on subcommittees, would it be expected that we would maybe get updates or feedback from them about what's happening on their subcommittees, and then we talk about it as a group and they take that information back? Or, I mean, maybe is that something that we would expect to appear on the agenda, or would that be committee member comments?
I'm trying to even remember the subcommittees that we,
So you're thinking about what subcommittees do we have now?
yeah, and
So we had the Parks Master Plan, which was Scott and I, and AA was Barry and Scott. When we worked on the master plan in the beginning, we've had various subcommittees over time, but I think those are the 2 that still exist or don't exist.
As we've refined our approach with council and the role that this body is playing, there isn't a big role for subcommittees. There isn't a real, there isn't a time when just meeting with 2 of you is really going to be, no offense, but it's not going to be the review and input kind of role. Doing that with just 2 of you and then coming with all 5, it kind of prolongs that process. So there really isn't, we don't envision a lot of subcommittees, and we don't envision a lot of doing that work. We'll come and present these things to the whole body and do that process. So, you know, I at this point, again, not really imagining much on any kind of subcommittees.
Okay, thank you.
Kim?
Yes, thank you. I had a question about number 8, the presentation on Napa County Drought Contingency Plan. So I think you said that this is in process. This is still in development. I'm sorry, did I hear you correctly?
You're talking about number 8?
Number 8.
No, that's done. The Napa County Drought Contingency Plan is completed, as is the Urban Water Management Plan, which was a city document. What we're talking about is getting a presentation from the city staff who worked on both of those, and to kind of share with this group what water conservation is in a more detailed way and how it relates to energy efficiency. And so you kind of have that awareness as it pertains to sustainability, as we generally understand what that term means, again, in that kind of undefined realm from the council.
So to, help us to continue to develop that aspect.
Yeah, exactly. So when someone says, what do you think sustainability means? Well, we had a presentation on GHG. We had a presentation on water conservation and water supplies, which has a GHG component. So it's sort of, we're kind of taking a stab at what the word sustainability means in the council, and committee member McClintock said, hey, what about water conservation? Because I think she was aware maybe of some of these other plans. So it was a good suggestion, and we're going to pull that together for you.
Yeah, thank you. That is a good suggestion.
Great, thanks. Okay, I have, I think, 3 very minor things. Number 3, should we be adding sustainability into that list?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That
Thank
was, yes.
Okay, and then items 1 and 2, do we have money budgeted already to work on these plans for staff or consultants?
That's a good
I
question.
mean, 4 falls into that too, actually, I guess. 1, 2, and 4 are kind of more heavier lifts, I think, or different types of lifts.
I'm gonna say on 1, no. On 2, yes, and on 4, no. But I'm equivocating a little bit. 4 is something we're going to be developing more in-house with our in-house expertise with our public works director. So we weren't envisioning a lot of consultants there. The same thing with the Newell management, and these are multi-year efforts.
Yeah,
so
I have a separate question about that.
Yeah, so we weren't envisioning a consultant from the Newell management plan. If we get to the place where we think that may help us or may help us get to completion, we'll talk about it. But for the work that was envisioned for the next 6-ish months, on 1 and 4 consultants, no. And on 2, I believe we have some money budgeted that will involve some consultants, but that's also a multi-year effort. And probably most of that effort that we take place in the next 6 months is actually going to be more staff-led at that point before consultants are involved.
Okay, so bridging off of that question is, it seems like we would break this list into 3 sections. One is, I'm going to do it backwards. The 3 items that are going to take us longer than this fiscal year, which is 1, 2, and 4. That, I think that's one grouping. And then I was going to do the CIP as a separate grouping, and then 5 through 8 as a different grouping, but maybe you just need to pull 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 4 and combine them. So when we present it to council, we can say to them, we know 1, 2, and 4 are going to take longer, but the rest of these items are going to flow pretty easily. Does that, am I reading that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that there's a need for the categorization. I actually think the sort of scattershot approach helps tell the story a little bit. The 3 is going to be a reoccurring, right?
Yeah.
Each year, 3 will stay the same. It's just the numbers will change. The design documents is probably going to be multi-year, to be honest. I mean, it'll probably be the year end and next year's work plan because we're thinking about the milestones, right? So, the first 4 are heavier lifts and reoccurring.
Okay.
So I don't know. I think we can go with compartmentalization, or
I don't know. I just am thinking ahead to when we're presenting to council and how we present it. So I don't know. You present
sometimes
it,
with the scattered approach, it allows them to kind of bounce back and forth.
Okay.
And kind of if you lock in a categorization, sometimes you start thinking, well, why are we categorizing? And was the and it this way it is a shotgun approach. It's a variety of things. Some will last longer, and I don't know that we need to change it.
Yeah, you know how to present stuff to them better than I do. Okay, so my last thing is, can we add to the parking lot the bike ped scooter interaction? So it goes onto our list. So in April, it'll come back and we'll go, oh yeah, the bike ped scooter interaction.
Yeah,
Because
we
I think we
can.
still have the parking list, don't we? Parking lot?
Yeah, I'm sure we do. We are trying to avoid a list of documents and things that are, carry with us through the bureaucracy and attachments. We do have a lot of working drafts of stuff, so we're not going to lose track of that document.
Okay.
But I would also encourage each of you to kind of have your own parking lot of stuff and kind of keep that with you also. So, that's the approach we'd like to use.
Okay. Any other questions regarding the work plan? How are we going to present this? Are you presenting it and we're just backing you up, or are we presenting it? How is it best presented on December 20th?
So it won't be a joint meeting.
Oh, it's not a joint meeting,
No,
okay.
it's a regular city council meeting.
Okay.
And it'll be one of a bunch of different items at a regular city council meeting. My plan was to bring it, I'd like to bring it as a consent item, but I think we're gonna have to bring it as a business item. And, I was just gonna give a staff report. Actually, the staff report is pretty well drafted. It's gonna look remarkably similar to the one that's in your packet today. And, to say, we're not going all over the exhaustive history of 2022 and where we've been. It's much more of a synopsis, and then to say, we met with the commission, here's the final thing we came up with. There's support from the commission on that. Here's the list of things we're gonna try and do for the end of the year. And, by the way, sustainability seems to be kind of an amorphous topic for us. We're gonna wanna get back with you and really get some understanding about what that means. And ad hoc committee will mention some of those things, just not in the staff report, but just in the conversation with them. We'll tell them about the next steps with the ordinance and modifying the municipal code so they're not surprised in January. And we'll talk about the recruitment, which went out yesterday. So we are recruiting for the 2 vacancies, and have gotten a real heightened interest in all of our bodies, the Planning Commission and PCS, and so we think, particularly with the expanded purview, that there will be a heightened interest in this body as well. And so that recruitment, I think, closes at the end of the calendar year, and you have in front of you somewhere, I think. Yes, that's what this is. So we'll be mentioning this to the council, but here's us telling the community, here's this body, and apply. So this is the application form, and we're doing it a little bit different than those other bodies. We actually incorporated the supplemental questions into the application, and the other ones, it was just give us your name and phone number, and then we came back with questions. So the supplemental questions are actually in the application, which should stream that process a little bit. Expecting interviews to be sometime in mid-January would be my hunch, and then by the time the first meeting in February rolls around, whoever is going to be the 2 members would join the 3 whose terms are still active.
Great. Okay. And we don't need a motion or anything on this, we're all
No.
good?
No,
I have one other question, I'm sorry. You mentioned in the staff report this governance training. Do you have a date for that yet? You talked about that there's gonna be a new manual,
Oh, gosh.
new handbook, updated committee commission protocol handbook, and then a training in the spring.
Oh, gosh.
Refresher, is
Yeah.
that still on for the spring? I'm just trying to plan my calendar.
No, that's far too ambitious.
I
for spring.
know. I was thinking
So
that.
the answer is no, and we should strike that from the staff report for council. A very ambitious idea. This stems from the fact that there's actually a PCS commission handbook. There isn't one yet for OSATs, and there's actually not one for Planning Commission. And so we actually need to create a commission handbook that would apply to all of the bodies and is less about their individual purviews and whatever, and is more about the role and responsibility and that sort of thing. And we'll have a little bit of chapters for the individual bodies, and we'll get into a little bit the specifics for each body. But what's meant by that is to go through that, eventually when that document is ready and the council is fine with it, to bring the bodies together and to kind of work through that with them so that everyone's on the same page. But spring of 2023 is far too ambitious because,
Okay.
so the answer is no.
Okay, great. I think we have completed this item,
Perfect.
unless Tara has something else to say.
Public comment?
So we have public comment on this item. I'm so sorry. I open it up for public comment. Thank you.
Sure. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make a public comment? Please raise your hand. We have one public comment chair from Kara Werner.
Okay.
Hi, Kara, are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You
Hi,
have
Kara.
3 minutes.
Great, thanks. First of all, thanks to everybody who took time to read and consider our comments. Really appreciate it. Really excited about this conversation. It's been a pleasure to hear you work through it, and I'm excited about the direction that you're going and where you're landing. And in listening to you, I just wanted to offer a couple more points for consideration. One is that what might be helpful to sort of be on the same page and be a little more specific in the resolution is to add something like staff will have a goal of bringing designs to the committee at the 60% point. Of course, they can, as City Manager Holly mentioned, when there's a decision point, they might, a decision fork, they might bring it earlier or whatnot. But that's kind of the milestone that another advisory committee in the county uses. It doesn't mean anyone gets in trouble if it's at 65 or 70, but it's just kind of like a sort of an understanding of like, yes, that's the goal, is to see them at least by 60%. So that is something maybe to consider adding to that point about the phrase about the review of design. The other thing is, it might be helpful to list the actual improvement projects that will be reviewed that year. I've seen that done in other jurisdictions, and that way people know the opportunities that they will have to give input. And it'd be really great to see at least one design review before the end of the year, just for the committee to get its feet wet and to see what that even means and looks like. So depending on what's on the CIP list, if there's one that seems appropriate right now, you could add those specific ones rather than sort of just a CIP program update, because that could mean a lot of things. And then finally, in listening, the only point that I personally would love to understand better is this body advisory? Is it a commission? I really appreciated, again, City Manager Holly's explanation of Planning Commission and how it's not that, and I think that's very clear. But I know that this was voted on as being a commission, and I'm not sure why advisory would be taken out altogether. Throughout that document, it says review and input. And so, and I heard the city manager use the word recommendation. To me, that all speaks to advice. So why not use that word advice somewhere in that document? At least it will certainly help you if you do decide to go for a bicycle-friendly cities designation. So I'm not sure what if there's resistance to that word, if or not, but I'm more curious about that. So thank you again for considering our input.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kara.
Thank you. Do you want to address the last? I think
Yeah,
because our other commissions don't have advisory in their name.
Yeah,
right?
this already has a lot of words. We took out it seems superfluous, really, to have advisory in the name of the body, like PCS doesn't and planning doesn't. We do have, like I said, number 7 in the work plan is a capital project, and we do expect to have a milestone design brought to this body for review and input, and it's going to be an earlier design milestone. We don't see the need to specify a % complete or a particular level of iteration, because there'll be some that will have 0, that won't come at all, and there are others that are going to have multiple, like we anticipate on the Newell Trail. So, just getting back to kind of the explanation of this body is advisory to the council, and that's the role that it plays. And it does that through its consultation with staff on various things, and then we take that record and we provide that to the council. And so the way that you're serving that advisory role is because the council views your consultation with us as that, and then they take it's different than a public comment at a podium, right? As they're considering something, they'll consider public input, and they may change something based on public input. You wouldn't call that advisory necessarily, right? That's more responding to public comment and what have you. And for whatever persuasion or whatever idea came forward, that they may or may not take action on something. The notion of a body and what's represented as we've gone through that process, that's how they view it as advisory. And so it's through consultation with staff, and then like I mentioned, sorry, I got to speak in the microphone. We bring that forward with the record of how that whole process went, how that whole, whether we brought it to you and we took the comments, yeah, there were great comments we put in, or we can't do it for various reasons. And we tell the council that. We say, they had these comments, we did or we didn't, weren't able or were able to incorporate them, and here's why. And so that process is advisory in what the council is considering. So putting it in the name would just add another vowel that we couldn't afford as we came up with acronyms. And but I think it's pretty clear, what the body's doing.
Okay.
One of the things that I heard Kara say was that if it would go a long way to helping, using the word advisory in the description somewhere, and helping the city get the title of the bicycle-friendly city. I'd like to know more about that. I'm not sure how it needs to be used. I didn't get the idea that she implied it had to be in the title. I thought that if it was in the description somewhere.
Yeah, as we look at those kind of recognitions in that program specifically, we're going to look and provide the best application that we can and trying to get the most points and so forth. So, how we characterize what this body does will be geared towards that particular application. And so, these terms and these words have a lot of different meanings and kind of a lot of different contexts. So we appreciate the input, and we'll consult with folks to figure out if we get to that place where we're pursuing that application and that recognition, we'll consult with folks who've done this in other places and go, what's the best way to come up with with this application? What are the buzzwords? What are the reviewers looking for? That kind of thing. We do that. We routinely get budget awards and auditor report rewards from our government finance associations, and so we know how to structure things and how to set things up so that we can routinely get those awards. It's a similar concept.
And Jason, also just to recap, we still have the resolution 2010-115, which states that OSAC is the bicycle advisory committee for the city. So that resolution is still valid, and it does have the word advisory in that resolution.
So will that carry forward with the commission, or do we have to
That's a good
resolute
point.
it?
Thank you for bringing that up.
So I was just going down the same path as you were, like.
I think what
this?
we're actually going to need to do is add. Thank you for bringing
Add
that
that
up.
wording in here?
I think we're going to need to add that provision in here, and I think we're going to need to add 2 lines about essentially rescinding those prior resolutions. We need to have clarity about when something stopped and started. So thank you for bringing that up. We're going to supersede 2010, and we're going to restate it by saying it's OSATS is the advisory body, not OSAC, right? So
And it would just be in this resolution then?
correct, the one that
Okay.
we take to council. So we're gonna that's a change we're gonna need to make, and we're gonna want to make because we're gonna want to have that clarity to say, look, we're taking what was in the past, we're superseding it, and we're making the same finding in here in this new resolution. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay. Good. Okay, anything else? Oh, Kim.
Yes, thank you. So in doing that and making that revision, we're talking about a revision to the work plan.
No, it's
Oh,
a
we
revision
talked
to the
about the
resolution.
resolution.
Sorry.
Oh, so adding that to the resolution, about the transition, of the bike advisory committee. I mean, can the word advisory be retained?
Yes, it will. It will.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're gonna the terminology bicycle advisory committee is actually a designation from MTC, and it relates to some funding programs, and so it's a specific thing we're going to want to reference because it relates to funding programs, and so it's even though this is known as an active transportation commission for the reasons that we've already gone through, we're also going to designate it as this special bicycle advisory thing, because bicycle advisory committee, because of different funding relationships with MTC and others. So it will be in there. Yes.
Great. Because I agree with Tara that I am very interested in the designation. I know, for instance, Davis. I'm just familiar with the Davis. That they have that designation,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it would be really super awesome if we could get that designation as well. By the way, compliments on the repaving the I can't remember what that street is, but the one that goes to American Canyon High School that I drive literally every day, but I can't remember the name of it.
Newell,
but now it has the
Foster?
bicycle lanes. And today, for the very first time, I actually saw the teenagers who normally ride their bicycles actually using that bicycle lane.
Oh, great.
Yay.
Great. Yeah,
Success.
we've stopped raining long enough for us to get those stripes on the ground, and we have no parking signs too. So that's actually a big thing, and we're gonna have to work with the elementary school with Canyon Oaks because people like to park in bike lanes as they drop off kids. So we're gonna have to work on some enforcement there. But
So is the green paint down?
I don't know because I wasn't out in the field today.
No, yeah.
I do think it would be great if this is just an aside, but to have some more. I saw the information in the newsletter that you put out, and that alerted me to the fact that there was going to be a repainting, and I think you referred to it as a revised traffic pattern. But I think that, and I wasn't quite sure what that meant until I actually saw it. So I think maybe if there was more information out to the public about specifically what was done there, and also encouraging the teenagers to ride, and everybody who rides their bike, encouraging them to use the bike lane, because some people still use the sidewalk, and I think that it would just, as educating the public around what has been done and what, what's available to bicyclists, for sure, would be helpful.
Appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Okay, I think we are done with this item. We're going to move on to, there's more in the Q&A. Is there anything, Liz, that we should be paying attention to? There's 7 now. Nothing? Okay, good to go. Thanks, Tara. Okay, management and staff reports, anything?
I already covered the OSAC, or the OSAD's recruitment. That was going to be the main point, is that encourage all your friends, let them know the recruitment is out, and they have until the end of the year to apply.
Great.
That's it. Unless
Okay.
if you had anything.
Nope.
Okay. I think this may be the last time I'm going to say committee member comments.
It would be.
and
It'll be
future
commissioner.
items.
Yes.
Well, it's not the last time I'll be asking about future items for consideration, though. So, do you want those at the same time, or separate?
It's fine now.
Okay. So, time for anybody have comments? Tara, first.
Well, this was actually about the handbook and the governance training. I just wanted to let you know that I was really happy seeing that in there, because I think that this is one of the things that I struggled with on the committee, that we never really, I've never felt like I had like clarity of understanding. So kind of learning on the go. It's been a little bit stressful, I feel like
Sure.
I'm in a much better place now. But, especially thinking of new members coming on board. So I'm really grateful to see that on there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Kim, Barry?
I'll just.
Oh,
Go ahead, Kim.
go ahead, Kim.
Oh, I just wanted to say I agree with Tara. That is really necessary when you're serving on a commission, a committee, a board. I serve on several boards. I mean, people are kind of thrown into these service roles.
Sure.
And not really entirely understanding the processes. You've explained so many, processes, Manager Holly, that I was not aware of, even through this process of, reconstituting this body. So I know it's a steep learning curve, and we're always learning, but as Tara said, coming into it, I think people need, basically, I'll call it an orientation.
Hmm.
So I appreciate that. And I already made my comments about the new traffic, paint for the traffic. So once again, just really want to appreciate that was done, because it was really I think it was really sorely needed.
Thanks. Barry?
Okay, three things. As I was meeting with Kara and Carlotta, I wanted to get the copy of the bike plan and discuss that with them. And I didn't find the bike plan on the city's website initially, so I searched for, or maybe I just searched for bike map. And I got this map and I brought it to them, and Carlotta goes, "Oh, that's nice. That's the 2012 map." So the bike plan was updated in 2019. So this map is, and this, and then I realized this map had shown up at a Vine Trail meeting too. So I was going to mention it, but I didn't find it again. So I called city and I got Jen Kenson back, and Jen was terrific. She's like, okay. And just the way it plays out is American Canyon has a bike plan. It's the American Canyon Bike Plan, but it is Chapter 10 of the countywide bike plan. So there was a link in there, and I don't know if the link was working. But anyway, I think we're gonna, if Jen can find it, this map, we're gonna get rid of it because it's, retire it. And it's in the 2019 plan, it's replaced by two maps, and one is for existing facilities and one is for recommended facilities. And then there's the one that has bicycle collisions and other stuff on it too. But Jen is also going to make it its own American Canyon Bike Plan on the city's website, so you'll be able to find it like that. So just a shout out to Jen, because she was terrific. And a Vine Trail update. I might have said this before, sorry, but from Calistoga to St. Helena, it's 7.5 miles. It's under actual construction right now, and that'll be completed end of next summer. So you'll be able to ride a bike or walk from Calistoga to St. Helena, 7.5 miles, safe class 1. And the Vine Trail applied for a $10 million grant with the ATAP program. Didn't get it initially, but there's a second round that goes through MTC rather than be awarded from the state. And the scoring for the Vine Trail looked pretty good, so there's still a shot. And that would fund from St. Helena down to Yountville. Yountville and Napa's done. Coming down Costco's a little, that's still got to be done. And the Vine Trail's looking at the Devlin Road from Airport Boulevard up to Saskville Ferry to the Butler Bridge, going on to Napa Sand property. And I know Tara's
like that.
waiting if she can ride
Bike to work.
bike to work. So those are all looking good. And then on Saskville Ridge, I don't know if a note went to the city council on this or not, but a few months ago, the Open Space District was awarded a $1 million grant, 1.1 million, and that'll be used to build a trailhead and a little parking lot off of North Kelly Road, so just north of Highway 12, and that will get you to the trail that will go up over the ridge. It's called Saskville Ridge, and down into Napa. So you'll be able to start here in American Canyon, ride your bike or walk up or drive up to North Kelly Road, and then hike up and over and down into, or ride bike down into Napa. So that's pretty cool for American Canyon because we're served by that. And I don't know if a note went to city council, but I want the Open Space District, I want people to know when we have a success like that so that they'll support us later on. So that's it.
Thanks. Well, the only thing I have is to thank everybody. It's been an amazing year working through all this, and I believe this is potentially our last Open Space Advisory Committee meeting.
All right.
So.
It is. I did not bring cake, though. We did cake
I'm
last
sorry you
night.
didn't bring a cake. So I just want to thank everybody for the hard work working through this. It's been a journey, and I think we've come out with a great success and potential for some exciting work going forward. So.
Well said.
And I think we've talked future items to death, so I don't think we have anything else to add. So unless there's any other comments, I'd like to adjourn. And it is 8:55.
Oh, perfect.
All you have to do is slap your gavel.
Oh. Great, thank you
Thank you.
all.
Thanks, Nance.
Thank you.